Hi, and welcome back to Knit Your Stress Away, your podcast all around knitting, crocheting for stress relief. My name is Nadine. I'm your host here on the podcast, and we are currently right in the middle of a summer throwback series where I'm bringing back previous episodes from the last year and a half-ish of this podcast. And today I'm very excited to bring you a super fun episode about knitting basics and the must-have supplies, in my opinion, that you need to have when you first start to knit, and those that you can skip, because let's just face it, there is so much out there that you could buy, but you may not need when you first started, and you also might be in a place where you're not 100% sure if knitting is for you, but you are ready to kind of test it out. And you want to make sure that you're not buying a bunch of stuff that you're not going to end up using. So I got you covered in this episode. This was episode number 74 as the original episode. And again, just in case you didn't hear this in the last few episodes, you can find everything you need, including the free downloads that I offer and the workshops at theknittingmamas.com. So disregard any links that I might mention in these episodes. They may not work anymore, but this one link, theknittingmamas.com, is where you can find everything that you might need. All right, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, friend. Welcome back to Knit Your Stress Away, the podcast for busy moms who need a little creative calm in their lives. I'm Nadine. I am your knitting bestie here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast, and today we are going to tackle a big question that I hear all the time, and it's, what do I actually need to start knitting? And just as importantly, what do I not need? Because let's be real, when you Google knitting supplies, it can feel so very overwhelming. There's all the things, and it's really hard to determine what do you need in the beginning and what can you wait with. So this episode will be tackling all of those things. So I highly suggest for you to have a notepad. If not, I have a little something for you too that you can just download for free. So let's dive in. Welcome to Knit Your Stress Away. I am Nadine Medina, a mom who rediscovered knitting during a stressful season and found it to be the ultimate way to relax, recharge, and reconnect with myself. If you're feeling overwhelmed and wondering if there's a creative outlet that could actually help you feel calmer and in more control, you're in the right place. In this podcast, I'll show you how knitting can be a simple stress-busting tool, even if you've never picked up needles before. So take a deep breath, let go of the chaos for a moment, and let's explore how knitting could become your new favorite way to find calm and joy. All right, welcome back, and a new week here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. So knitting supplies, it can be so overwhelming. So today I'm aiming to take a little bit of that overwhelm out for you so that you can really just focus in on, what do I need? How do I get started? And what do I not need, right? So circular needles, straight needles, double-pointed needles, worsted weight, super bulky, stitch markers, row counters. What the heck? Like, I swear half of the stuff when I first got back into knitting, first of all, you got to realize that when I first started learning to knit, it was all in German because I grew up in Germany, and yeah, it's a whole different, it's like a different world when it comes to these very specific words in this particular niche and in this craft. So for me, getting back into it just a couple of years ago, it was in 2020. It's no longer just a couple of years ago. Am I the only person who feels like the whole pandemic, like it just kind of erased a couple of years in my mind? I just can't ever keep up with how fast time has gone by since. But anyway, totally off topic here, but all these, not just lingo and jargon and, all the things, but also the names of the stuff that I thought I knew. It was just so confusing. So even if you're not dealing with the language barrier that I had to kind of figure out and, navigate around, it would have still been so very confusing for me, especially when it comes to yarn weight and, little tools and stuff that you need. And abbreviations in patterns, don't even get me started on those. Like, what? But if you've ever felt completely lost looking at all of these things, let me just tell you that you're not alone. At least that is my personal experience. So I'm here for you now, turning around and passing it on to you so that you can cut through all that noise and just know what you need and get started, right? So we're cutting through the noise and the confusion, and I'm going to break down the essentials that you actually need to get started. It would be nice to have these tools, but they can, wait till later. And the ones that you just don't need yet. And by the end of this episode, hopefully you will know exactly what to grab so you can cast on your project, your first project, maybe it's your second one, with total confidence. And by the way, if you don't want to make notes right now and you want to have all of this in like a really easy to follow format, I've got you covered. I have a free cheat sheet that you can download. It's the 3 things you need to start knitting. It lays it all out for you. It has links in there. And it now this is new, comes with a handy glossary so you don't have to Google every other word as you try to go through your pattern or figuring out what you need for your knitting. It's a whole page. You can actually print it out if you like. It's part of the cheat sheet, and it has the most common lingo in the knitting world. It has abbreviations and just other things that you might need that you may have been wondering about, but also may have been worried to ask. Ask me how I know. There are things where you're just like, okay, I feel like I should know this, but I don't. And I feel worried that someone is going to laugh if I ask this question. So no worries, I got you covered because I felt the same way. It's all in there. Okay, so that one's free. You can download that at theknittingmamas.com/start. And if you want to go deeper and just go straight to creating, I have a guide for you that is called Become a Knitter in 5 Simple Steps. It walks you through everything, including video tutorials to help you actually do the thing. So you can get that one at theknittingmamas.com/guide. I'm putting both of these links into the show notes for you so that you can just easily click on them when you're done listening to this episode. And by the way, forward this episode to anybody that you know who might actually also get something out of this and who wants to start knitting but is just as confused. Maybe you have a buddy that you're trying to, start this hobby with. Send it to her as well. All right. What do you actually need to start knitting? Let's go with the essentials, because that is all you need. There's literally no reason to unnecessarily spend money, confuse yourself, and, grab things that you may not end up using at all. So let's start with number 1, which is obviously a pair of needles. You're going to need knitting needles. For me personally, I go for circular needles, even if you're knitting something flat, which is most likely what you're going to do if you're a total beginner. I highly recommend starting with a flat project, not something that is knit in the round. However, you can use circular needles for that as well, and I actually recommend that. So we are diving into why that's the case, why I recommend that in a different episode, because there's a little bit more to it. For now, just trust me on that. The best needles, even for a total beginner, are circular needles. The best size for a beginner, in my opinion, and after trial and error and, realizing what works best and what doesn't, is a US size 8 or 5 millimeters. So that's the same size. One size is the United States size. The other size is just a millimeter size. So that would be a European size. You will find both like numbers on the package and on the needles themselves usually. So it doesn't matter what you like when you type it into like Amazon or Google or whatever, it'll come up with both and you should be able to find those. Personally, I prefer the ones that are made from metal versus bamboo or any wood. But that's a personal preference. Some of them might slide a little bit easier. That would be my personal preference, but that's something that you kind of have to decide for yourself. I would go with a 24-inch cable. It's kind of a medium size because as a beginner, you're not likely to knit something super huge first because you want that quick fix, like you want that quick, beginner, like I want to get this thing done. I want to have something small that I can accomplish relatively quickly. So you have that awesome, like I did that feeling. And that's not going to happen if you knit something super gigantic like a blanket. So go with like a medium length cable for your circular needles. Number 2, you will need some yarn, of course. Can't knit without yarn. So I would say, this is my personal preference for a beginner, go for something smooth and chunky. Chunky is actually like bulky or chunky. Those are names for yarn weight. And I personally find that the best yarn for a beginner. It's pretty thick, which means it knits up very quickly. It makes for a fast project, but also for a nice cuddly, super comfy project. And it also is really nice because you can see your stitches really well. And knitting with those bigger needles and the big yarn, to me, feels the easiest as you're starting out. It can be a little tricky to knit with something very skinny or very thin and tiny. My personal preference for yarn that I highly recommend for beginners is called Hue and Me by Lion Brand. It's a mix of wool and acrylic. And for me, who has a little bit of a wool allergy, this is actually perfect. Even though it has some wool in it, it's still not enough to bother me. But I do know that there's people out there who even can't stand this and they have to go full acrylic. So make sure that I guess you can only really figure it out by using it and then seeing if you're allergic to it or not. But you may already know. So find the one that works for you. But I would definitely go to a website that is specifically for yarn. It could be Lion Brand, it could be any of the other ones, because they usually have their yarn sorted by various factors. It could be by color, it could be by length, whatever, but it's also often by weight. And then you just go for the bulky or the chunky yarn weight and just see what you like. The third thing that I recommend having as you start, and this is actually it, those three things, it is a tapestry needle. And this is just a pretty thick sewing needle that is blunt at the top, and it helps you weave in the ends when you're done with your project. This is, for some people, sadly, a part of knitting. For me personally, I actually enjoy it, so might as well embrace it because it has to happen with pretty much every project, where the end of the string of the yarn, the tail that you have in the beginning and in the end of your project, you have to weave them in unless you're okay with them just kind of hanging loose, which I don't know anybody who is. So, you just grab that tapestry needle and then you weave them in. All of this is actually in the guide that I was mentioning to you. So there's links in there and everything else. So you can just go straight there, click the link, and it takes you to my favorite tools right here. So those are the three things that you absolutely need if you want to start knitting today. That's it. That's all you need. So don't even worry about anything beyond that, really. So what is nice to have, but not necessary? There are some things that can help you, that make knitting a little bit easier, or that you just want to have down the road. But again, they don't have to be in your bag first thing. So the first thing here is on my list is a pair of scissors. The reason why I put this here is obviously you will need them. As you finish your project, you're going to have to cut the yarn, but you can use a pair of scissors from your kitchen. So no big deal. You don't have to get a, fancy, crafty scissors from a craft store, but you can, of course, obviously you can, but you don't have to. I'm still using a pair of scissors that I have from my sewing days, which I still sew sometimes, but not as much. It's just fabric shears that I'm using, but I know a lot of people have super tiny little ones. They're so adorable, and I'm yet to get one of those. I really want to because it's much easier to fit in the project bag as I'm on the go versus my large fabric shears. But, again, this is how much unnecessary this is. You really don't need it. Second thing is stitch markers. It is really good to have, and definitely very soon, if you continue knitting, I highly recommend grabbing them. Stitch markers are little circles that you place on your needle to mark a certain place in your project. Or, as I showed in a reel on Instagram not very long ago, is also a great way to mark when you're casting on. Mark every 10th cast on or stitch so that you don't lose count. So it's a really good helper. But again, it isn't absolutely necessary, and you could even use safety pins if you wanted to, or make a loop out of something else. I've had some interesting makeshift stitch markers before. The little, what is that called? The little loop, the metal thing from a top of a can. Used that as a stitch marker before. I even used I had a cough drop wrapper in my bag, and I didn't have a stitch marker, so I just used a cough drop wrapper and make it a little circle out of it and put that over it. So you can be creative there too. But stitch markers are not very expensive. I have the link in the cheat sheet for you as well if you just want to see the ones that I use, and they're just good to have. But again, not 100% absolutely necessary to start knitting, unlike the needle and the yarn, which you really do need. And then As the third thing on my list, I have measuring tape. Once again, nice to have, and down the road for certain things you might really need it, because some patterns will say, okay, now knit in this pattern until your work measures 5 inches, 10 inches, or whatever. So you're going to have something to measure with. But again, for your first project, it's probably totally okay to not have a measuring tape. But most people actually have one in their house. So just find that and, throw it in your knitting bag. Now, for the fun part, the stuff that you can now skip for now. For now, you can skip the next 3 things that I'm going to tell you. Number 1, any fancy needle sets or interchangeable needle sets. Super awesome to have. I'm not going to lie. I have one and I do love it. It's very convenient. However, you do not need 10 different sizes of needles when you're just starting out. So stick to that one pair. You can make a couple of things just with that one pair and then see if this is even really for you, if you're doing it enough to where you can justify needle set or interchangeable needles that will cost a little bit more. So I highly recommend waiting on that and not just out of the gates get the most expensive stuff. Speaking of expensive, the next thing is expensive yarn. I don't believe that you need to spend $30 on a single skein of yarn that is hand-dyed and alpaca wool and all the fancy stuff. It's gorgeous, don't get me wrong, absolutely gorgeous. And I have spent that money on really nice wool. But as a beginner, again, I reiterate, if you are not even 100% sure if this is going to be the thing that you're going to do often, I hope it is. I honestly hope it is, because you've heard me talk about the benefits of this craft for so long now. But just in case, don't spend your money there, because there's gorgeous, gorgeous yarn that is very affordable, somewhere between $3 to $10 even per skein, and it's so beautiful. Among them, my Hue and Me from Lion brand that I mentioned earlier. Again, link is in the show notes, just so you know. It's Hue and Me. So Hue as the color, Hue, and Me. It's from Lion brand. It's designed by one of my favorite knitting designers. She also has another one called Color Story. It's a little bit of a lighter weight yarn for the summertime, and it's fully acrylic, which is even better for those with the wool allergy. So please do not go and spend the most expensive yarn. The other downside of having that yarn is, and again, ask me how I know, is that you may not ever touch it because it's so beautiful and it was so pricey that you just don't want to mess it up. So let's not do that. Let's actually buy some yarn that's affordable and then reuse it. Okay? Deal? All right, number 3 here of the things you do not need is a complicated pattern. Let's keep it simple in the beginning. This may go without saying, but I wanted to mention it anyway because I feel like there are so many amazing things that you see out there on like Instagram and on the websites that you might be like, oh my gosh, I want to make that. And you just grab a pattern randomly without checking, is this in line with my skill set right now and where I am. So I always recommend looking at what they say, who the pattern is for, because it'll say, beginner, absolute beginner, advanced beginner, advanced knitter. And also check, because in most patterns, when you buy them, for example, on Etsy or even on like Lion Brand or from a designer that you find on Instagram, they will tell you what skills you need in order to complete that project. So if you're really new, or if you're just still feeling like a beginner and you want to take it easy, keep it simple, right? Make it something basic. I highly recommend something in a garter stitch pattern, which is nothing other than just one stitch. It's the same stitch each direction. So you're going to just knit the whole time. And it makes this beautiful squishy pattern that you're going to end up with the little squiggly lines is what I call them. But it's enough, and there are so many beautiful ones that you can make that are for complete beginners. So please don't feel like you have to, start with something complicated and then you're just going to get frustrated and you're not going to finish it, or you're just like, oh gosh, this is just not for me. There's a reason, why you want to work your way up. So take my word for it, make something simple, and please don't make something really big. I think I already said that, because that's the mistake I made when I first got back into knitting, because I was like, oh, I know how this works. I've knit before. This is easy. I can do this. It wasn't hard, but it was such a large project. It was a ginormous cardigan, which I didn't even end up keeping because guess what? I didn't make a gauge swatch. That's something that we'll talk about too. If you download the guide that I just mentioned, you'll find out why you need to make a gauge swatch. And by the way, I'll talk about it in the next episode as well, which is all about beginner mistakes, by the way. So I'm going to tune in after this one as well. But I also made it out of cotton yarn, which is lightweight yarn, so it's pretty thin, and obviously thin needles because they have to go with that. And I was knitting what felt like forever and ever and ever. And I'm actually surprised that I didn't give up, to be honest with you. So that's definitely a lesson that I learned the hard way. And I wish I had done some chunky yarn, really small, very simple patterns, to give me that quick win, because that is just so much fun. So there you have it. Knitting can be as simple as you want it to be, but you need to know what you need to know in order to grab the right things. So I have zero judgment for you if you're like, I'm so confused, I don't know. I'm so glad you listened into this podcast episode for sure. If this was your first one, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. And I hope you got something out of this. And now that you know exactly what you need and what you don't need, your next step is to actually start knitting. And again, I made it super easy for you. If you want to have all of the things that I just talked about today, plus the glossary in a simple format that you can just print out, you got the breakdown in the free cheat sheet, 3 things you need to start knitting. You can go grab it at thenittingmamas.com/start. And if you want to go deeper and you want to just go straight out and start doing this and you're like, I'm ready, you can get the guide, Become a Knitter in 5 Simple Steps. It has videos. It has all the links to all the supplies. There's even recommended patterns in there that I would recommend to make. And you can grab that one at thenittingmamas.com/guide. That's it for today, friends. If this episode was helpful, I would love if you would take a screenshot, share it on Instagram. You can tag me at thenittingmamas_. I always love seeing what you're up to. You can also tag me in your projects. If you gather your tools, take a picture of that, show it in your stories on Instagram and tag me in there. I would love to see that. And I would also love to have you in our community, the Beginners Knitters community. Changed the name a little bit so that it's easy to remember. It's a Beginners Knitters community. And that's what it's called now. You can find us on Facebook. Go to the link, thenittingmamas.com/group, and it'll take you right there. Unless you're already a member, then you know where to find us. And until next week, we are back here next week on Tuesday on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. All right. See you then. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on today's episode. I hope you're walking away with a bit more inspiration and a few ideas to make your self-care a priority. If today's chat gave you a little boost, I'd love it if you could leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This helps other moms discover the podcast and start finding more calm and creativity in their day as well. And don't forget to join us over in the Knitting Mamas community on Facebook by going to thenittingmamas.com/group. Thanks again, and remember, you deserve time for yourself to recharge and feel your best. Catch you next time on the Knit the Stress Away podcast.